and welcome back to the Player Analysis Show, brought to you by the United Masterclass. I'm your host, Haider Rubbani, and I'm joined again by Jeremy Smith, the French football expert and journalist, to talk about today, Jeremy, Adrien Rabiot. So welcome back. This is the second one in the series. What are your thoughts on Rabiot's performances this season? I'm going to jump straight into it because I know that a lot of people aren't a big fan of him. We'll talk about whether he's underrated or overrated a little bit later on. But his performances have been really, really good. And I'm just going to read out a few key things that I saw from him this season. I haven't watched a lot of him, but I've watched a little bit. And he was nominated for Serie A Midfielder of the Season this year. Probably Juventus' best player. Very, very difficult season for them. He's been able to play multiple roles. So, he's played as number 6. He's played more advanced as number 8, which may lend to why Erik ten Hag is interested in him. He has the ability to progressible, which has been really, really good. He's added goals to his game as well. I think you mentioned to me off air that he might be Juventus' top scorer, which is great, but also shows how poor they've been, especially Vlahovic hasn't lived up to the hype. So a really, really good season, and it's seen him become more of a well-rounded, let's say, footballer. Have you been impressed from what you've seen?
I've been really impressed. I think you mentioned the sort of Pavard, the previous one we did on Pavard. There are sort of comparisons in that they're victims of being able to play in different positions and also having strong personalities. And you mentioned baggage. I think, again, a lot of it depends on what you think of him and his mum. But, I mean, I am a fan. I've wavered at times, but I actually like his personality. I like that he knows what he wants. It's got him into trouble a couple of times. Same with his mum. But you look at their background; they're actually really decent people. His mum, I think, has done a lot for her local, sort of small youth football club when no one else would help them. They've had tough times. Adrien's dad had that locked-in syndrome and died a few years ago. So I think that, they've had to grow up to be tough mentally, and maybe a couple of times that sort of, let's say, sort of overflowed in a way that not everyone has appreciated. But so it's sort of taken him a while to really establish himself and maybe feel comfortable in his own skin. But I think we've seen the last couple of years that he's very much there. And the fact that in 2014 he was on Deschamps' reserve list for the World Cup squad, and he basically wrote saying, "I don't want to be a reserve. I want to be in the squad. So I'm turning down the offer." Spent a couple of years in the international wilderness, and the fact that, obviously helped by Pogba and Conte injuries, for example, the fact that he is now pretty much an indisputable first pick for Deschamps, I think says a lot, partly about Deschamps' willingness to change his mind, but about Rabiot's strength of character and obviously performances to force his way back into the international setup. You look at all the teams he's played for, the managers he's played for, they can't all be wrong. I know, like, when he first joined Juventus, he wasn't fantastic, and a lot of fans questioned him. But the fact that a great manager like Allegri was sticking by him all the way through the season says that he sees something in him, and he's certainly been repaid in the last year, 18 months, with some brilliant performances and also leadership. I think we often forget that they're not necessarily kids, but it's not just about footballing ability. It is also, who goes into their shell at big moments, who can, really be at their best under the biggest amount of pressure. And you hear Rabiot being interviewed, and he's like a little mouse, like he's so quiet and shy. But on the pitch, I think he used to show that. Now he really shows leadership. He's built up in structure, which, a conspiracy theorist might say, well, you'd expect that of a Juventus player. But I think it's also the sort of aura around him which has changed a little bit. I'm sort of just going on without you asking questions. Sorry.
No. This is fantastic. I want to actually pull you up, Jeremy, on that personality point on the pitch, because I don't know too much about his. From my perspective, when United were linked with him last year, and he was possibility of playing at number 6, and then we were also linked to Casemiro. I was delighted we got Casemiro, and I think he's been a great addition. And one of the things that I guess that kind of concerned me, and you kind of changed my mind. Obviously, you give me more backstory and you give me more information in terms of why maybe him and his mother are sometimes can be the way they are. But you talked about personality now. What Ten Hag looks for and what he has done really, really well when he's been signing players. You think of Lisandro Martinez, who's brought great character and a bit of tenacity on the pitch, aggression. Casemiro the same. He's brought leadership. You think about Anthony as well. Like, he might not be the most popular player, but he never shies away on the pitch. We overpaid, but I think he's not been as bad as people think he has. Malacia as well, he's always defending on the front foot. Christian Eriksen, maybe a bit more quiet, but he's obviously a player that comes with some aura as well on the pitch. So when you're looking at not just the, let's say, physical attributes that what Rabiot can give you on the pitch, when you look at the personality as well, would that be attractive then for Ten Hag? Is he the sort of player that wouldn't hide on the pitch, who wants to get on the ball in big games? Because that's something that United need. You've seen us play. Man United play Brighton, for example, your team, many times this season, and I think what we've lacked in midfield is sometimes a little bit of personality, but especially someone willing to get onto the ball and not be scared to try and control proceedings. Is that something that United fans could expect to see from Rabiot?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it's probably fair to say the most I've seen him is when he was at PSG. And one of the issues there was that I thought he was an excellent number 6. And I think most people thought that, but he didn't want to play number 6. So that was sort of the first sign of a few tensions there. And he was like, no, I want to play further forward, that kind of thing. And I would say, I'm not saying that number 6s don't have personality necessarily, but I mean, quite the opposite often. But they have their sort of very clear, relatively limited roles. Win the ball back, give it to someone else, stay in that little pocket in front of the defence. And maybe that was where the sort of dissonance was, that he did that very well, and maybe personality-wise, he wasn't yet mature enough and ready enough to push forward, to read the game well enough to take a game by the scruff of its neck, and be that sort of, as you said, kind of more progressive player. But I think definitely, some of it is French psyche, and it's often like when a player goes to a team like Juventus or Bayern Munich that you hear them afterwards interviewed and say it's just a completely different mindset, a winning mindset. That's something I've never experienced before. And even though obviously PSG are, at least within France, supposed to be a winning machine, I think maybe he's really come on mentally and personality-wise at Juventus. And whereas maybe a couple of years ago, I'd have said, yeah, he's not the player I'd trust in a big game to really take control and bring other people with him. I think now he's coming to that side. But what I would say as well is, I think when he was at PSG in big Champions League matches, when bigger names than him sort of kind of shirked away or maybe were found wanting, he, I think, often maintained good performances, scored a couple of important goals. So I'm not saying that he was ever sort of overawed by big occasions, but I feel like now he's become that kind of player who's gone on to that next level and will bring players with him as well.
No, very, very interesting. And I do want to maybe drill into some of the statistics here. So we've got the statistics from FBref, and I do want to talk about the progressive carries, because one of United's biggest issues, and this is why they were looking at Frankie de Jong to play with Casemiro, is that United don't really have a player that can take you from A to B. So let's say you're in midfield and you're getting pressed very, very heavily. And this is what, or let's say the centre-back's giving you the ball and you turn and you can carry the ball, sort of through the press. And you carry United forward, and either you draw a foul or you release, let's say, Bruno Fernandes or any of the wide players. When I've seen Rabiot this season, what I've really liked from him is how progressive he has been as a number 8. I actually didn't think he could. I thought he was just a number 6. I thought he was functional. I thought he read the game well. And this is kind of, obviously, we're talking a year ago maybe, and I thought that he was someone that kept it very, very simple. But his capability to progress the ball has been a very, very, very high standard. And I think what's been really good, and the reason why he's scored a lot of goals recently, is that he started to attack the box a lot more. So you can see here, when you have a look at the statistics in terms of touches in the attacking penalty area. He's getting 2.6 a game. That's in the 88th percentile. So when you have a look at these, he's almost changed his game, hasn't he? He's from being someone that's maybe shielded the defense, had the ability to go forward, but he's almost like developed his game to a point where he's become a different type of midfielder or a different profile. I think it's really interesting. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's funny that I guess he's in the French team. He's more or less replaced Pogba as that sort of left-sided midfielder. By the way, he's also a couple of times taken that Matuidi role in that on the wing of Deschamps' sort of lopsided midfield. But I'd say like mainly as a sort of left side of a midfield too. And he's not quite the same as Pogba in that he's not as imposing physically or personality wise. I think Pogba is still a little bit more forward thinking and Rabiot a little bit more defensive thinking. But he's similar in that he can do everything that you'd want a midfielder to be able to do. And yeah, I think a lot of it has been whether he's been allowed to showcase that. So as I said, at PSG, he wanted to be able to be released a little bit more, but he was expected to sit. I think at Juventus, whether it's because he's come on or because of their limitations in terms of their squad or ability, he's clearly been given more responsibility and thrived on it. And I mean, it's not exactly a sort of recent comparison, but to me, he often reminded me of Michael Ballack at his best, where when he's playing well, he just glides across the pitch and everything looks effortless, whether it's winning the ball back, the way he reads the game, the short passes, the longer passes. I think he scored France's equaliser against Australia in their first match. And obviously that's an important goal when you're down a goal and a man with Hernandez's injury very early in your first World Cup match. You need something to settle the nerves. And again, he was there, right place, right time to do that. So yeah, he can do it all. He's got a decent long range shot. He's tall. And like I said beforehand, where I felt that, again, personality and physicality sort of going together, maybe he was a little bit too wiry and too easy to knock off the ball. Even the hair sort of looking a little bit like, Darlene from Roseanne or something like that. Now he's really bulked up and is a presence and a menace in the area, in both areas. Much more comfortable to push for and given license to push forward with the ball at his feet, as well as being able to spray the passes around. So I think he can do a little bit of everything, and he's now being allowed to do that. And so he's showcasing the talents that he probably always had, but wasn't always allowed to use, and maybe didn't know when to use them.
Very, very interesting. And my final question, I'll do a two-part question. So would you say that he's now underrated? I think there's a lot of United fans that sitting here thinking, I don't know if he's the caliber player that United need. Listen, Man United have Fred and McTominay in their midfield. And Christian Eriksen's a wonderful footballer. But you've seen, and we saw this in the FA Cup final, that defensively, I don't think he has the legs and the engine. And this is why United looking at someone like Mason Mount, who I'm actually very excited about, and why I think Rabiot and Mount together will immediately elevate the floor of United's technical ability. That's been a big problem for United in terms of being able to play out from the back, and then also being able to control games in midfield. So would you say he's underrated, and do you expect him to move to Manchester United? Because obviously, there's a lot of reports now at the time that we're recording this, and Ten Hag is a big, big fan, and I can actually see him slotting in now as at number 8 going into next season. I think it could happen, but there might be issues with wages. So yeah, what's your view on both those questions?
So in terms of I'll do the second question first. I think that it definitely looks likely. I mean, Pavard seems to have been connected with a lot of other teams, whereas Rabiot, not only this window, but it always seems to be United. It seems to have almost happened a couple of times before. You mentioned the wages, and by the way, that's possibly something that's got a few backs up before. Definitely when he left PSG, maybe Juve as well. It's the fact that he seems to leave when his contract expires, and people don't like that because their club doesn't get a fee. But
is it to sign on? Is that what it is? Is that the reason why? Like, so I can maximize how much he makes?
I don't know what the reason is, but I mean, if I was to defend him, which I'm inclined to, I would say there's a contract there for a reason. He hasn't done anything wrong. Certainly at PSG, he never sort of led anyone on and pretended that he was going to stay. And I thought the club sort of did a job on him, basically, you know, turning everyone against him. And again, I think it's an element of him knowing his worth, and his mum, who's his agent, doing the same. And that sort of leads on to the first question about being underrated. I think he comes with that baggage, and I think people focus on that rather than what he does on the pitch. And as I said, at times it's sort of been earned, or they could have handled things better. But again, the bottom line is he's, you know, this might be an issue, I don't know, but, you know, from being at Man City for a few months when he was a kid to PSG and being part of their proper good team, you know, arguably I'd say that PSG have not come close, despite all the big names. They haven't come close to that team of like Rabiot, Motta, Ibrahimovic. And as much as anyone, I don't think Rabiot's been replaced. The Juventus team, now clubs like Man United after him, commanding a place in the France team that keeps reaching tournament finals. He is a very good player, and he's proven it across different clubs across, you know, a good decade or so now, almost. So he's the kind of person that, you know, it might take him a few months to adjust to a new country, a new type of football, maybe a new level of physicality, but I definitely think he's capable of dealing with all of that. So I think as long as fans are patient, yeah, I don't know if I'd say he's underrated, but I don't think I think a lot of people ignore the football bit because they're too focused on the, you know, the salacious stories or whatever. But I think the bottom line is that he's always done it on the pitch.
You made me excited, Jeremy, to be honest. Now, I think when I'm looking, if United sign Mason Mount and let's say Rabiot, I think that is a great upgrade when you still got Casemiro, Bruno, Christian Eriksen, and let's say you might have one of Fred and McTominay still, and that gives United a lot of depth. So look, thank you so much for joining. Where can the listeners find your fantastic work?
So I'm on Twitter, SmithJez, at Jeremy Smith 98. I almost gave away my email address there. And and then still appearing on French Football Weekly and various different blogs for different clubs, especially during transfer season.
Absolutely. Listen, guys, make sure you give Jeremy a follow. He's always my go-to man when it comes to anything French football, any French person. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining me for this second edition of the show. I'm sure we might get you back on if Kolo Muani is a go, so I will be messaging you if that's the case. Guys, make sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button as well, turn notifications on. There'll be lots more Parent Analysis shows going on, and we will see you all next time.